Good morning everybody and welcome back to the Morning Bible. Today is a slightly different one. I have a co-host with me for the first time. Archie, do you wanna come and say hi? Nope. My dog is fast asleep at my feet. So he is not interested in coming on camera at all. But that's okay, he's still helping. He's still giving me moral support, that's what they always say. So we are in Luke chapter 20. We've got another hard-hitting parable from Jesus coming today, which is a really good one. So let's just jump straight into it. From verse 9 in chapter 20 says, "And he began to tell the people this parable." So this parable is addressed to the people, but really it's addressed mostly to Jesus' opponents, as you'll see as it progresses. He says, "A man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants, and went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants, so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent another servant, and they also beat him, and treated him shamefully, and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent yet a third. This one also they wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, 'What shall I do? I will send my beloved son, perhaps they will respect him.' And when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, 'This is the heir, let us kill him, so that the inheritance may be ours.' And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of this vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others." So, let's pause there, because that's a big chunk of stuff that's just happened. So, this vineyard. This parable seems a little bit similar at first to a parable we looked at the other day, with the servants being given the money to invest, but you see it diverges quite quickly away from that. So this is the story about a man who owns a vineyard. He's called a lord in the literal translation, and so the sharp among you will have noticed that's already a comparison between this guy and God. So this guy's standing in for God, but we'll get to that a bit later. We have a guy who owns a vineyard, right? And so he's headed away for a while, he's out of town, and so he has some tenants come in to look after the vineyard, to grow the crops, to look after the land, to look after, I don't know if there's houses there as well, just do all the general stuff that they're expected to do. But because they're tenants, they're expected to pay him, like it's still his vineyard at the end of the day, and so he's still expecting to be earning money from this thing. And so he hasn't seen money in a little while, and so he says, okay, I'll send one of my servants back and they'll pick up the money for me. And so he picks one of his servants, he sends them, and when the servant gets there, the people beat him and throw him out of the vineyard, don't give him any money. They just want to keep the vineyard for themselves, keep that profit for themselves, and not give any of it back, to the extent that they'll actually be really malicious and evil towards the person who's been sent to them. And so the vineyard owner shows a good deal of patience here and sends another person, sends another servant, and this servant is also treated the same way. And then he gives the people a chance again. He says, okay, I'll send a third servant, and the same thing happens. It happens to 3 different servants. They get beaten and thrown out and left without any of the money that this man is owed. He says, okay, it's fine. I won't retaliate. I won't fight back. I won't do anything evil towards these people. I won't even kick them out of the vineyard necessarily. I will send my son to get there, to get the money. They'll know him. They'll know who he is. They'll give him respect. Because he is the son of the person who owns this land that they're making this profit off. So they'll show him some respect. They'll give him the money because he represents me. He is part of my family. He stands there for me. He conducts business. He'll have the family seal on his ring. You know, he can do business for me. And so he sends his son, and the son is treated in the same way. The son is beaten and thrown out. And so how does this vineyard man respond? Well, in a fairly reasonable way. He says, all right then, he says, I will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. Sorry, that took me a second to find. So that is a fairly reasonable response. Like, look, these guys have shown that they're not just kind of a little bit corrupt. They're not just stealing a bit of extra money. They're not just not paying me the full amount. They're not paying me at all, and they've actively attacked both my servants and my own family, my own flesh and blood. They've attacked these people, and so it's fair and just that this guy then seeks to destroy them and take the land back. That's not an unreasonable thing. But he doesn't choose to just take the land back. He chooses to give the vineyard to others. He decides, okay, these people are no longer fit to have the vineyard, so it goes out to other people instead. And that's a very important point. So, rewind back to when I said that the vineyard owner is representative of God. Let's read through that again. So, we've got the vineyard owner who has tenants come in and stay on his land. Those tenants are the Jewish people. God has created this world, he's created this place for us to live, this whole universe full of amazing things, and this planet covered with amazing things. And he has a group of tenants there to stay. Specifically, I think the tenants stand for the Jewish people. They are the people of Israel, who are, God's chosen people throughout the Old Testament. They're the people who God gives promises to, who he protects, he gives various prophets and all the rest of it. So this is God's chosen people, the Jewish people. They're the tenants. And so God sends his servant to them because he's owed money, essentially. God has all this sort of work that he's done, all this land, all this vineyard that he's given to these people. And I guess the payment here is praise. It's relationship with God. It's following his laws. It's maintaining the land. It's doing all that kind of thing. It's being faithful and honest to God. So he sends a servant. He sends a servant here stands for one of the prophets of the Old Testament. He'll send someone to them and say, okay, well, tell these people what's going on. See, they need a bit of direction. They need a bit of leadership. They need to be in communication with me as their father. They need to be praising me. And so he'll send a prophet to them to come and speak into these people, speak into these times. And these prophets were mistreated. We see that throughout the Old Testament. Prophets are not listened to. They're abused by the people. They're thrown out. They're treated horribly. Both prophets and just various Old Testament figureheads as well are treated horribly by the Jewish people. And so this happens in this parable 3 times. This happens again and again and again with different prophetic figures. I'm going to sneeze. I'm going to sneeze. Dog didn't even wake up, didn't even move an ear at that. So you see this throughout the Old Testament, all these different figures. And so it gets to a point where God says, okay, well, this isn't working. Sending servants isn't working. I need to send someone who represents me. I need to send my own son, my own flesh and blood. So that's Jesus. Jesus has the authority of God. He stands to represent God. He has the same family as God. So he sends Jesus. He sends his beloved son. He's specifically called beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him. He says, this if they're going to respect anyone, it's going to be my son. And so he sends his son. And this parable tells us, the tenants saw him and they said, this is the heir, let us kill him so the inheritance may be theirs, may be ours. And this is what happens to Jesus. He's again foreshadowing his death. He's beaten, he's humiliated, he's whipped, he's nailed on a cross and he dies. He has this brutal, horrible death. And so this parable is pointing ahead towards that. He's saying, I'm the beloved son that's been sent and you guys are going to treat me poorly. And so what's God's response to that? Well, is I will destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. So the people who reject Jesus, the people who turn away from him, who beat him, who kill him, who don't give him what he's owed, who don't give him respect, those people will be destroyed. That's just the way of things. But I feel like we say this sort of every video. I'm never gonna shy away from saying that in any of these videos because that's what the Bible says and it's the truth. Those people who reject Jesus and who hurl abuse at him and who attack him, those people are cast out. Those people can't have a relationship with God. But he says he will give the vineyard to others. So historically this vineyard has belonged to this Jewish people. God's kingdom has belonged to the Jewish people, but now he's saying I'm going to give it to others. So that's people like me and people like you probably, is people who are outside of the Jewish faith. They're now welcomed into relationship with God. They're now welcomed into community with God. This promise that had been exclusive to this one people group in this one region has now been blown wide open to be everybody in the whole world is welcome to this. And so that's his response. That's what this vineyard man is saying. And so, yeah, we'll quickly finish off this passage because there's a little more at the end, which is the people's reaction to it. It says, when they heard this, they said, surely not. But Jesus looked directly at them and said, what then is this that is written? And he quotes a passage of scripture. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. A stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. So the stone that Jesus is talking about is a reference to himself. So he is the stone that's been rejected. He is the stone that has been not followed, that has been thrown out, that has been killed. But he's about to become the cornerstone. Through this mistreatment, Jesus is going to become the cornerstone. So those of you who don't know, the cornerstone is sort of, in building practice, it's a stone that's in the corner, and that is a central part of the building's construction. If you pull out that cornerstone, it's all going to crumble, essentially. That cornerstone is the most important structural piece. It holds everything together, and it's one of the first things you put down when you're constructing. And so Jesus is saying he has become that cornerstone. The stone that was rejected has become the cornerstone. And then he goes on, he says an extra bit. He says, everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. So this is reference to people who slip up, people who fall short, who fall into evil ways, people who fall on that stone. So it's people who fall from where they're supposed to be. There's a drop of, you're supposed to be up here and you fall down to here. People who fall onto the stone will be broken to pieces. So if you fall from Jesus, if you fall onto Jesus, you'll be broken. But when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. So this last bit is a reference to what's going to happen in this final judgment, that when the stone falls on anyone. So there's going to be a day where sort of the sheep and the goats are separated. We haven't had that passage yet, but the sheep and the goats are separated. The people who follow God and have followed his ways will be welcomed into the kingdom, and some won't. And so those are going to be the people where the stone falls. Yeah, so obviously there is like heavy stuff in there, but it's heavy stuff because we're fallen people. We're not doing what God tells us to do sometimes, and God is perfect and God is justice, and so there needs to be a mediation of that. But at the same time, God is merciful, God is loving, God is faithful to us, and he knows our hearts. And because Jesus has died on the cross, it's blown everything wide open that anyone can come to him, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been. You can come and receive forgiveness through that, as we'll see with some New Testament figures going forwards. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Once again, my co-host is still fast asleep, so he's been very useful. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye bye bye.